Episode 5 of the Americas is called The Frozen North, and it's all about Canada and Alaska. Again, similar to last week, there is only one episode dealing with the entirety of Canada. Again, the second largest country in the world. So this episode opens up in Hudson Bay in the far north of Canada, and here we see polar bears. So the polar bears aren't really able to get out to hunt seals because the ice hasn't fully formed yet, so they're basically having to scavenge on the sidelines. And we cut to wolves as well. We see the wolves are doing a little bit better in that they're kind of in their element, but they're not doing that much better. I mean, still hunting is still difficult, so they're also having to go into the fringe areas. So the two are kind of overlapping in territories, and they find a dead polar bear and they start feeding on it. However, this other polar bear comes out and kind of scares them off. So that was kind of teased in the trailer. It looked like there was going to be some sort of heated interaction between the polar bear and the wolves, and I kind of doing a little bit of reading before watching the episode, kind of knew that was going to be in it. So I was really looking forward to that. However, that's not really what happens. We basically see the polar bear rocks up, and obviously it's massive compared to the wolves, and the wolves just shite themselves and bugger off, basically. Not really as captivating as I was hoping, to be perfectly honest with you. But it was still interesting to see the two species interacting at all. But it definitely wasn't as good as I was hoping it was going to be. But at the same time, in reality, I guess wolves would just flee if they saw a massive polar bear because, you know, a polar bear is going to take on the vast majority of a pack of wolves, so not really worth their effort to, you know, confront them. But, you know, still, it was interesting, it was cool, and I did enjoy it for what it was, although maybe it wasn't what I was hoping for. And then we see the Aurora Borealis. It was really cool. They did a good job of explaining why it occurs. I think it's something we all take for granted. We all know about the Aurora Borealis, we all think it looks cool, but I don't think any of us really know why it occurs with the sort of, you know, forces at play there. So that was interesting, that was cool to hear about that. And we also see snowshoe hares and lynx. That's a sequence we've seen before, definitely in Seven Worlds, One Planet, and I think in Life as well, back in 2009. Might have popped up there, I don't really remember. But it was actually interesting because it was from the hare's perspective. Usually I think it's from the lynx. It's really cool seeing how the hares actually are able to adapt to this environment. It's not really the sort of habitat you'd see a hare in, a forest. So it was interesting watching it eating bark and stuff like that to, you know, scrape it a living. And the lynx going for it as well was entertaining enough. So while it's definitely a sequence I've seen before, it might be the best version of that sequence, to be honest. So that was cool. And then we explore the Rockies, and we see how avalanches form. That was interesting. I mean, again, nothing I haven't seen before, but cool. Seeing people skiing in the Rockies as well was interesting. It kind of shows a bit more of a human interaction with the natural world, which has been a sort of understated theme of this series so far. So I thought that was alright as well. Then we move into the sort of spring and summer months, where we see sharp-tailed grouse. Lecking essentially on the prairies. That was fun. I mean, watching them lecking at night was quite funny, especially when the guy gets up really early to go to work, or I presume, and the music it plays is quite fun as well. I think it's interesting watching this show because it's an American production predominantly. They can actually play pop music, whereas in the BBC series you would never get that. It has to be a score, because, you know, mainly for copyright reasons, I imagine. In America you seem to be able to get away with a bit more, so that actually added to the sequence. And watching the grouse lek in the day as well was cool, but again, I think the nighttime bit was definitely the better part of that sequence. And then we go to the tundra, we see caribou. The caribou sequence is actually quite good. It's nothing you haven't seen before. Yet again, it's them, you know, with their calves, moving on their migration. They cross a river, and the calf gets swept away. That was actually good, because I did actually feel genuine tension there. At the start of the sequence, I was like, okay, cool, the calf's going to get back to its mum, and it's going to be fine. But the calf kept drifting away, and the mum kind of was like, do I go with the herd? Do I stay with the calf to try and find it? And she ultimately chooses the herd, and I was like, Are we not going to save the calf? Is the calf not going to make it? And in a way, it was weirdly, in a really sick way, refreshing, I think, because it kind of reminds you that, you know, nature is pretty bleak. But no, the calf does actually manage to get out of the water and manages to make its way back to its herd. It did look like the odds were stacked against it finding its mum, and while there may have been some trickery, I mean, I don't know if the calf actually found its mum, maybe they showed a different calf. It did look like the same female, to be fair. I know caribou all kind of look alike, but it did look like the one we saw before. So that hopefully is the right calf. But I do feel like in the majority of cases, it's very unlikely the calf does find its mother again, and they probably do die even in this situation. So I liked how they did highlight the gravity of the situation while also having a happy ending. Again, you can show how dark and harsh nature is, and still show some nice stuff at the end, because, you know, even while this story was happy, you felt like the majority of these stories aren't. So it was still effective, but also it didn't disappoint viewers, so that was really cool. And then we move further north, we see walruses in Alaska. This was a very brief sequence, but quite an interesting one, because it was just males calling to each other, and the actual song of the walrus was quite cool. It was a really weird noise. It's difficult to describe it. It's definitely somewhat melodic. It did almost feel like some sort of musical instrument was being played, which was really cool. I'd never seen that before. So I've seen walruses all the time. You know, you see the walruses on the beaches, That's nothing new. What they were actually doing while they were there was quite interesting, so that was really cool. I really liked that. And we sort of end with the salmon run. So the salmon run is obviously a sequence that's been done many, many times, but I think this did a really good job of highlighting it from the salmon's perspective. Yes, there are animals, there's gulls, there's bears, all this stuff is after it, but the salmon were very much the focus. Watching the salmon go upstream was really cool. How difficult it was. Even when a gull goes for it still was like a life or death situation, and a gull's not really a bear. You kind of feel like the odds are a bit even up there. And actually filming it from the water, like from the salmon's perspective, was very effective as well. It's showing you the reality that they're in. So that was really cool. And actually watching the male salmon rot as they're moving upstream and describing them as zombies. I mean, yeah, they're not zombies, but whatever. It was still really effective. And again, it looked pretty minging. I've got to say, I've seen rotting salmon in these series before, but I haven't seen it highlighted in the way that this sequence did. And again, you see their eyes are pretty much gone in some cases. They're just desperate to mate. Again, not very nice to look at, but definitely interesting. It's something that I've seen a lot, but I've never really felt was investigated too heavily. So that was really cool. And it was actually a really good way of ending the episode because the salmon run is, a pretty iconic thing. When you think of the big sort of natural wonders that take place in Canada, it's probably up there and maybe even surpasses the caribou migration. So that was cool. And then we see the winter comes and we see various animals like polar bears, Arctic foxes, coming out there more in their element. We don't dwell on them at all, but it's just like showing you that, the frozen north, that's what the episode's called, and we're in the north when it's frozen, so that's a nice way of ending it. So yeah, this episode I did enjoy. It was pretty good. Again, similar to last week. Again, I liked it a lot. It had a lot of stuff I hadn't really seen before, or things that I had seen but maybe filmed in a different way, or another perspective was shown, which was quite nice. Yeah, I think the highlights for me were probably the salmon, to be honest. And as much as I wasn't, blown away by it in the way I wanted to be, I did enjoy the polar bears and the wolves interacting. That was quite nice. So yeah, overall, this episode is pretty good. So what are your highlights? Let me know in the comments below. What parts did you like? What did you not like? Did you agree with me? Let me know. As ever, next week I'll be doing the next one, whatever it is, I don't know. And yeah, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, or don't if you don't want to. I will survive if you don't, but it's nice if you do. And yeah, I'll see you next week, and goodbye.